Hello everyone, this is Liz with Whip Stitching Whimsy. Welcome! Today we will be doing some crafting rather than sewing once again. We're going to be making this Dr. Facilier inspired Halloween wreath, so let's get started. First things first, you'll want to gather your supplies. In the description of this video is a detailed list of what I used and where I got it, so most of the supplies that you are going to need for this project were actually purchased from the dollar store, so yay, that's always a plus. So once you have those gathered, we're going to jump right in. I started with the tarot cards for this wreath because I wanted to give them plenty of time to dry. I'm using a set of extra large playing cards that I picked up from the dollar store. I decided I wanted to paint these cards and get a little extra painting practice in this week, but if you're not much of a painter or you're rushed on some time, you can always print an image of these cards out on your computer onto maybe like a thick cardstock, or perhaps glue the image onto a set of old playing cards and then use those for the tarot cards of your wreath. As you can see from the finished cards in the top left corner, I decided to feature both Lawrence and Naveen on this wreath. I did this since the tarot readings play such a prominent role in this scene, and I felt having that all back sides of the card showing may become a little tedious for the wreath and also a little bit tedious for painting. But you do you. I support you whatever you decide. Now for the outer glow of your wreath, I use this really bright neon green and deep crimson tulle. To create this look, you will first have to cut the tulle into strips. I cut the green tulle about 1 foot long and 1 inch or so wide. I used about 1.5 yards and cut about 60 strips of green tulle total. For the crimson tulle, I cut about 30 strips, but only ended up using about 15 of them. Still, it was nice to have the extra pieces throughout putting together the wreath. The pieces I cut are about 4 or 5 inches long and 2 to 3 inches thick. Once you are finished cutting your strips of tulle, you can put those aside. You can grab your decorative mesh, because we will be using those shortly as we start filling in the wreath. Now grab your wreath form and your tulle strips. I have 1 wrap of burlap on my wreath form already because I was experimenting with what order I wanted to piece the wreath together. Sorry, it's my first wreath. I had to practice. So, anyways, what we are doing to achieve that glowing neon look is tying the strips of tulle along the outer ring of the wreath form. I suggest tying about 10 strips of the green tulle along each section of your wreath form and interspersing your red tulle throughout the green where you see fit. I also tied about 4 green strips and 2 red strips into the very center of the wreath ring to give that little glowing effect into the middle just a little bit as well. Once you are finished with tying your tulle around the inner and outer rims of the wreath form, grab your decorative mesh and begin to fill in your wreath by weaving that mesh gently through the wreath form in small sections. I used a hot glue gun because that's what I had available, but I suggest using twist ties or something to firmly tie the mesh down to the frame. Unless you are very stubborn, just like me, and would also like burned fingertips, I do not suggest using hot glue. You will need to be very careful and very patient. The tulle and the mesh do tend to stick to one another, kind of like Velcro, but if you push the tulle away from the sections that you're working on, you'll have a clearer space to work with. Please be patient. If you have to rip the tulle and the mesh apart, do what you have to do. It's a Halloween voodoo wreath. It's okay if it looks a little disheveled. Mine ended up with a few holes in it because I also had this problem. To make the mask, grab your white and black craft foam. The first thing you'll want to do is to trace out the center circle of your wreath. Once you know how large your mask needs to be to fit in the center of your wreath, sketch your mask shape onto your white piece of craft foam. Once you have your mask base shape, take your black craft foam and cut out the eye and nose details of the mask. Now that you have all of your pieces, you're going to glue those black pieces onto the white mask, and your mask should be all set. You can put that aside for now. To make the Dr. Facilier hat, you will need to grab your red, black, and white crafting felt. Firstly, trace the shape of the hat onto a piece of paper so that you can use that as kind of a pattern piece. Cut the shape of the hat out onto a piece of cardboard to give your hat some stability. Then use the same pattern piece you used on that cardboard to cut out the base of your hat on the black felt. Once you have the base of your hat, use that to determine how thick the red band of your hat will need to be. I toyed around with the idea of using some black felt to add creases into the red, but instead ended up layering some more red felt throughout the red band to create a subtle creasing effect. Create the skull and crossbones from your white felt, and once you have all your pieces, hot glue them onto each other to make the hat, and then set that aside. Now that we have the base of the wreath finished, we're going to attach the handle, ribbon, the thing that hangs the wreath to the door, whatever that's called. Anyway, I'm using a feather boa for that piece. Flip your wreath to the back side and take your handle strip piece. I tied one end of the boa to the left of the wreath form on the back. Then weave the extra end of your boa handle throughout the ring of your wreath. This added some more feathers to fill out the wreath as well. Decide how much slack you would like your handle to have and how long you would like it to hang from the door, and tie the remaining end of your boa to the right side of the wreath frame across from where you tied your handle on the left side. Then, once again, weave that extra strand of handle through the ring of your wreath, and you're all finished. Now that we have our wreath and all our components, we are going to piece them all together. I found these funky roses at the dollar store that have eyes in them, sufficiently other side creepy in my opinion, so I decided that I was going to use those on the wreath. I started by layering those throughout the wreath, and then once I had my roses in place and attached, I decided the placement of all the other elements. So from there, I decided to start with the Dr. Facilier hat because it seemed like a really great solid base to start with. Once I had that hat glued securely in place, I moved on to attaching the mask to the center of the wreath. Secure the mask to the wreath where you can. To help this mask stand up more securely, grab some string and then flip your wreath over to the back side. Weave a strand of string taut through the middle of your wreath on your form to give the mask something to prop itself up on. Cut away any extra pieces of string and then flip your wreath back over to the front. Next, we're going to glue your tarot cards into place around the wreath. Be careful with your placement. You don't want to overcrowd your design. I had some plastic spiders from the bouquets that I picked up that went with those eye flowers, so I decided to sprinkle those on around the wreath as well to add a little bit more spookiness to it. Originally, I planned on placing the phrase, "I've got friends" on the other side, along the wreath, but my design was getting a little bit crowded, so I decided to make a little sign displaying the phrase instead, and then I attached this to the wreath through the decorative mesh with a wooden dowel and some hot glue. If you're making a sign as well, I suggest using a thick piece of paper or gluing the side down to a piece of cardboard. This keeps the edges of the paper from curling. After you've finished attaching your final elements, fluff up your wreath to your liking and celebrate by hanging it up on your door. So, this is what my final wreath design ended up looking like. Thank you so much for following along with me today, and I hope this brings you some inspiration for your own Disney-inspired craft. Let me know what kind of crafts you've been working on in the comments. I'd love to find out. And keep on creating. I hope to see you back here at our next video soon. Thank you again. Good luck with all your current projects.